the whole approach to this is we talk about the three A's. The first is awareness. You can't do anything you said until you define it. So what is it that I'm doing wrong? Then accept it. And then action it through the building blocks. So, and it really needs to go through those three steps. And that's really what I'm trying to change, because I think too often, you said earlier about how people just get thrown into jobs. We also get thrown into training classes. So like me, appreciation I can do in my sleep. I've been doing it, I write books on it. Why spend my time sending me to an appreciation class? Whereas as someone who's a micromanager, send me to the empowerment class. So I think if we can get that focus first, then we can send people and focus their time on where it's going to make the biggest difference at that time.
Debra, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back again. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you again. I'm like, I don't even know how you got to 6 books at this point.
I had some help on this one. This one I do have a co-author, so that does help.
But it's to be honest, so when you see like those people that got like 20 books, like most of them are ghostwriters, like most of the time. That's based on my experience interviewing a lot of authors. So the new book, which we're going to talk about today, Bad Bosses Ruin Lives. Bold headline, bold title for a book. The building blocks for being a great boss. What was the inspiration behind this new book?
So my second book that I wrote, I was writing with my co-author, and I was telling them a story. We were writing the chapter on leadership, and I was telling them the story about how a boss had impacted my life. And I said, "Bad bosses ruin lives," and the phrase just like took off. We put it on T-shirts, we put it on babies' onesies, stickers, everything.
You haven't put on a onesie, please. Don't tell me that's a real story.
They did put it on a onesie, so just like to make sure as your children grow, they don't have that. Yeah. But since then, I've been wanting to write the book, and I finally got around to writing it. I just thought that I've been a bad boss myself. I've had a bad boss. I don't want people to make the mistakes that I've made, and I wish something like this had been written when I was a boss. So it's my gift.
Because many of us are thrusted into those positions without any real training or development. Very rare. It's like, they're a high performer as an individual contributor. Of course they'll make a good manager. Of course they'll make a good boss. It doesn't work that way. Definitely in my experience. I learned the hard way by making mistakes, and I still do to this day. When I was looking at some of those traits of bad bosses, I recognize some of those even now. I'll be honest, in myself, that I was like, caught me in the moment. So let's jump straight in, if that's all right with you. What are the top 10 types of bad bosses?
Yeah, so just to take a step back on how we came up with these 10 is although the title is in your face, we wanted the bosses to be approachable, because you're right. You and I, we're going to get it wrong. We're going to continue to get it wrong. So we tried to look at what are the most common mistakes that people make, and which are the ones that we can actually do something about. So there are 10 of them, as you said. We did a survey. All of them at least had 50% of people saying that they had them. The top type of bad boss, which was very sad to me, is the unappreciator. 81% of people said they have an unappreciator. And I was sad because the book I wrote before this was on appreciation. It's like, just do something about it. So that was 81%.
Right, and on the website, the definition was doesn't show their people recognition, gratitude, or appreciate them, making them feel unvalued, invisible, unappreciated for their actions and contributions. That is not a good thing you want to hear.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens because bosses don't understand the importance of it, and they don't know how to do it. Sometimes bosses focus more on the negatives than the positives. And sometimes people just don't know how to say it in the most effective way. So yes, my boss thanked me, but I don't really feel appreciated.
Good job. Like one of those ones, right? Good job.
Exactly. That's a why bother.
Yeah. It's like, that's definitely one of the things I learned along the years is be specific about what you're giving. If you're going to appreciate someone or give feedback, like positive feedback, like be specific about what it is, and it means so much more to that person rather than great job. Yeah.
And I guess my tip that I'd share, and I have it in my appreciation book also, is if you need to train your managers on it, it's really, really simple. Tell them, or the first thing is say what they did, thank you for whatever you did, link it back to your company values, and then share the impact. So if you just train those three things, I promise you, your managers will feel much more comfortable about it.
Yeah. I love the part that you just mentioned, because I remember in my previous company, someone came to me, one of my team members, I was in a one-to-one, and said, like, I don't know how what I do impacts the business. And I was like, wow. It just shocked me for a second, right? And like, it's pretty demotivating not to know, like, what is the impact that your work actually has on our business, our customer, society, etc. So it really stuck with me that that's important to convey that, no matter the role, the function, highest levels of the business, someone who just started, super important.
Absolutely. And it's something that sometimes we go so quickly, we don't realize the power of it and the impact. And also, if you share it, then the person's going to understand what they need to do more of the next time also. So it's a great education, free training class, just by showing appreciation the right way.
Yeah, you're right. You're reinforcing those behaviors as well. What was the second one?
So there's a tie between the next two.
Okay.
One of them is the micromanager, which I definitely have worn this mask many times myself. There's 80% of people said they've had a micromanager. And I find this one sort of easy to go into, especially as a new boss, because you're not really comfortable with letting go of things. You're maybe a bit insecure. You're not sure, should I let people do things their way or should I do it my way? People think that you'll save time if you're a micromanager, or they're afraid of taking the risk of having other people get involved. But again, I've learned the hard way, micromanaging is absolutely, definitely not the right thing to do.
Why do you think so many managers become micromanagers?
I think it's a combination of insecurity. And again, I'll hold my hand up. As a new manager, I was definitely insecure, the whole imposter syndrome. So, if somebody presents an idea better than mine, am I going to look bad? As opposed to looking at it, if somebody presents an idea better than mine, fantastic. It's better for the company. I'm going to learn something new. So seeing it more as an opportunity. I also think that people think it's quicker to be a micromanager. Like a lot of us we have a lot of pressure to get things done. The world is moving so quickly. And if I just manage all the pieces, it's going to get done so much quicker, which it doesn't get quicker if you do that.
One of the impacts that I realized I was having when I've done that in the past is you're robbing the person of the opportunity to, even if they do fail, right? And they don't, you're robbing them of that opportunity to fail and learn and get better. So me thinking, oh, I'm helping by doing it, no, I'm actually taking away that opportunity, that learning moment from them by micromanaging, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And you're right. I think that's a really good point, because a lot of times as a micromanager, we think that they're going to learn better. We're going to show them exactly how to do it. It's like when I used to coach gymnastics, and I'd have these little ones on the balance beam, and I would get on the balance beam and show them how to do something and then think that they would miraculously know how to do it. They're not going to learn it until they start doing it themselves and falling off and getting back on again. And as you say, making mistakes. Those are the learning moments.
Yeah. What was tied with micromanager?
This was the easiest one, because the avoider is the ghost. So we made a ghost emoji. And this one, again, well, all of them, I have to say, are unintentional. And people do it because they're busy. They don't have time to, meet in with their people, talk to their people, give them feedback, all those types of things. They might be confused in how to manage people remotely. How do you interact with people when they're not in the same office? Or even just they might not know how to interact. They might not know how to give feedback constructively. They might not be able to communicate those types of things. So yeah, lots of reasons. And I think, this is one of those ones, again, you might be an avoider for one person, but another person you might not. I mean, I've managed global teams before. And so maybe somebody that I have working all the way in Australia, different time zone, harder to talk with. Maybe for that person, I'm an avoider, whereas someone who sits next to me in the London office, they might think I'm doing a great job.
Yeah. A lot of times I kind of feel like when I've seen that happen and play out with managers in our business and others, is they're avoiding hard conversations.
Yes.
They're like avoiding, sometimes on both sides. They both avoided each other, because the conversation, and those are the conversations that are most important, that need to stop the business moving forward, right, and fester. And the more that they're unspoken, the bigger the impact that it has.
One of my favorite classes to teach is a feedback class. And partly because everybody enters the room thinking, oh shit, I have to give feedback. I hate giving feedback. As you say, it's the worst thing in the world. And by the end of the class, people feel like, oh, I understand what happens when I don't give feedback. And
Yes.
I feel more comfortable. One of my best stories in one of my classes is someone told me how he left the house in the morning with toothpaste on his face. And it wasn't until the end of the day at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon where somebody finally came up and told him that he had toothpaste. So I always say, do you want people to walk around with toothpaste on their face?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Now I look at it like, what is the opportunity cost of not saying it, as opposed to, like,
Absolutely.
you know, looking at it through that lens. It makes it a bit easier. Um, what was next? What about the because you got avoider? What's the difference between the avoider and the ignorer?
So the emojis tell the main difference. So the avoider is the ghost. The ignorer has headphones on, so they're not listening to you.
Okay.
So they just, as a boss, they're not coming to you and getting your feedback. So it's in the other direction. So the avoider is more the boss towards the employee. The ignorer is still the boss to the employee, but they're ignoring everything that the employee is saying. And we all know the importance of listening as a boss. You cannot be an effective boss without actually listening to your people,
Yeah.
and hearing what they have to say when things are going with new ideas. They've got great ideas, and also when they've got feedback on when things aren't going as well. So
Yeah.
really, really important. And that one was 78%. So there's still a lot of people saying that their bosses are
That's a big
ignorers as
frustration.
well.
Like in my career, like one of the big, if I look back, right, and some of the biggest frustrations I had is when I felt like my ideas weren't heard and my feedback and perspectives weren't valued. Doesn't mean they
Yeah,
have to be right, but at least be considered and
absolutely.
valued. Otherwise, you just don't have that diversity of thought on the ideas, and it kind of makes people just kind of play it safe, right? You have a lack of innovation, a lack of creativity, and it demotivates people when they come disconnected.
And there's something called the Iceberg of Ignorance. And it's this great model. I think it was like from 1976. It's been around forever. And it basically just talks about how all the great ideas and all the problems are known at the lower levels in the organization, the people who are out there day in and day out with their customers. And if you don't listen to these people and hear their ideas, you're going to hit icebergs. So again, I think it's a great visual on why you need to listen to your people.
One of the ones that surprised me was the Coercer. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that probably is the only one that's a bit like I told you the other ones were all nice and safe. The coercer is probably closest to like a bully. And again, I don't think we do it intentionally. I've done it myself. I've been a coercer, and it's a misuse of power, basically. I'll give you a perfect example. I was in a meeting once, and it was going nowhere. We had like 8 people in the meeting, and we were trying to come up with one way to do things, and it was going back and forth and back and forth, and we weren't getting anywhere. So finally, little old me, and I'm like not even 5 feet tall, little old me stands up and goes, "We're going to do it this way. I'm the boss, and we're going to do it this way." And luckily, everyone cracked up laughing because it was hilarious. But that I was a coercer. I was trying to use my power in the wrong way, unintentionally, to get things done. Luckily, nobody really saw me as a scary boss, but if they had, it could have been a really uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. You also talk about like it controlling like the processes, the outcomes, strict compliance, almost like suffocating.
It is, and there's a lot of crossover. So when you talked about avoider and ignorer, there's lots of crossover. This
Yeah.
one has a lot of crossover with Micromanager
Yes.
also.
That's what I
Yeah,
was
there
thinking. Yeah.
is. I mean, we did go back and forth. Do we separate them all out? But we wanted to be as specific as possible because I think the more you can define them, the better chance we all have to do something about it.
Yeah. What about the Pretender? I wasn't expecting that either in the list. I've never heard of like that as a trait.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting. This one we decided to do because one of the things we did in our research is we went out and we asked people for their stories. And this one came from people telling us stories about a boss who is all sunshine and roses. So I'm a positive person, but if things are bad, you need to tell the person that things are bad. Going back to feedback, Or if things are challenging in the business, don't hide it from your people. How are they going to help the business survive? So a pretender is someone who wears a mask. This one, luckily, was only 51%. So hopefully people are getting better at doing things. But yeah, this is somebody who's wearing a mask, not sharing the bad news, not sharing what's really going on, thinking you're protecting people. And in HR, we've done this before. I know we've done this before, where we go out to our employees and, we're sort of tiptoeing around a challenge. And it's time to take those tap shoes off and just tell the people they're adults, bring them into the confidentiality loop.
Yeah. Kind of goes in a little bit with the avoider.
Yep, absolutely.
Avoiding the hard truths, which you think you're protecting someone or the business, and actually, again, you're actually taking that away as well. Firefighter, we've all heard about that one. we've all seen the firefighters. I've been one of those many times.
Yes.
Still am probably at this point.
Yeah.
As well.
And I think the thing about firefighters is it can be fun. It can be fun going from one challenge, one exciting thing to another. And I think that's why some of us fall into that trap. It's like, let's just do the exciting things, jump into this one, put out a fire. And again, you don't have to drastically change things to avoid these traps. If you could, going back to what you said about impact, if you could bring people into, we're going to put this fire out because we're going to save a cat in the tree. Or, we need to do this right now because of the impact if we don't do it, or even just pushing back sometimes. And I think too often, I know as a young manager, I would say yes to everything and just saying, you know what, we don't have the resources. We don't have enough water. We don't have enough ladders. We're not going to go fight that fire. You know what, we'll come back later, but let us focus on this right now and get it done well.
Yeah. I think that comes with experience. Earlier in your career, you think that's what you should do and that's what you do. And I think you learn the hard way throughout your career to ask for help. But I feel like it comes with maturity and experience. I think very rarely do people get that from day one,
Gina, it's interesting you say that, though, because when we were writing this one, the boss of mine I thought of as a firefighter was a very senior person. But it was because of their personality and their style. They loved if you do the personality test.
Yeah, the adrenaline. They got okay.
Yeah, but we learned to work around it. We did. And I think the thing about this is your people, like with my people laughing when I was a coercer, if you have a good, solid relationship with your people and you make mistakes, because as you said, we're all going to make mistakes, they'll be fine. My firefighter boss, that was the only area that they were bad in. And we knew that they were going to do it. And we just figured out how to work around it and how to get this person what they needed, but then also not, burn ourselves through the firefighting.
Yeah. The more I look through these, the more I see all the intellect in it's like a web. Because I was just reading the next one, the hoarder. Mm-hmm. And that really links into so many others, right? And we all know there's people in the company that keep all the information to themselves. They feel like if they share it, they lose some sort of power.
Yeah, goes back to coercer. Yeah,
exactly, right. And then I think that also is part of that is the way that companies were set up in the past as well, the traditional hierarchy.
Yep.
That you at a certain levels you hoard that information. That was kind of like what you did, but in order to be successful, agile, innovative, and stay competitive, it's the opposite. We need to share that top to bottom, right? As well. Yeah. So I don't think you'll last long in many businesses these days if you're a real hoarder of information. Yeah,
but I think it's also how you share the information. So we're going to talk later about the building blocks, but under communications, we as businesses, I think we did a great job during the pandemic being much more open and honest and transparent. And I'm seeing companies go back to hoarding it. So either as a boss or as a business, hoarding, and I think that we need to keep that transparency. Something my very first book I wrote was on communication, so it's something I'm absolutely passionate about because too often, again, it goes back to pretender. I think we hide the truth often because we think we're protecting our people, or they're so busy. One of the stories I share in the book about me being a hoarder was I had someone who was on maternity leave, and I hadn't had children back then, so I didn't really know what it was like. And when she was out on maternity leave, I didn't share anything with her. I didn't send her updates and what was going on because I thought, she's being really busy. taking care of her baby. I want to respect that. And when she came back, she was furious with me. She's like, I would have loved for you to have shared information with me. It would have made me feel more connected. It would have given me something else besides changing nappies to think about. And it was just one of those aha moments about maybe I need to talk to my people and find out how much information they want.
True. Don't
What's the best way?
Yeah. My wife had a similar experience when she had Robin, our daughter, where she found out her manager hadn't told her when she was on maternity leave about some potential new leadership roles that she would have been interested in. And when she found out, her manager said, well, I didn't tell you because I thought you'd want to spend more time with Robin and this requires more work. Like, don't just robbed her of the opportunity. but to your point, assumed he was doing a good thing. As well. Like, what do you mean you're not putting me up for that role? I've been here for 10 years. You've made that decision for me. Thinking, how many times does that happen?
Unfortunately, it does, and that goes back to ignore. You're not listening to people.
Yeah. What did we miss? We missed the blamer.
Blamer.
Yeah, I felt like
we call that one the Teflon boss. So nothing sticks to them because they're blaming people for other things. And again, it happens because of insecurity. You're in a meeting and somebody's chewing you out about something that's wrong, and you just throw your people under the bus. I think that's the expression. Throw your people under the bus, and you blame people as opposed to, sticking up for your people. So, and that one surprised me. I didn't expect as many people. 68% of people said they've got a blamer boss who's pointing finger. That's why the finger pointing, because all the stories that people told us was about pointing fingers at people.
Do you think that's linked to like not creating an environment where people have that psychological safety to fail, so therefore they have to point the finger?
Yeah. As opposed to, it goes back to what we said before, creating a culture and an environment where it's okay to fail, to learn. I think one of the examples I shared, because someone shared this with me once, how they have a whole on Teams, they have something where you just share when things go wrong. Great. Not to hide, but just like, this is what I did wrong, so that other people don't make the mistakes. I mean, that's why I write books. My very first book I ever wrote was sharing mistakes that I had made. So instead of pointing fingers, it's like, all right, let's learn from it. Let's get it out there and then, dissect it and think what we can do better about it.
Yeah. So I think is that all of them? Did we miss any?
The only other one is the blocker.
Oh.
And that one is 65%. And that we've talked a little bit about that one. That one's someone who gets in the way of your people, either developing. So, you're blocking them. Well, your wife, that was a blocker.
Yeah. That was a perfect example.
Yeah. Thank you for that one.
Because your definition in there, you speak about blocking career progression, which is basically what that was.
But it's interesting because one of the things that we talk about is that if we went to these people's bosses and said, your people think you're a blocker, I bet her boss wouldn't even have thought they were a blocker. Hopefully they, like me, they did it because they just didn't want to bother your wife and it wasn't intentional. I don't know the details, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now we've told everyone how terrible they are at being bosses.
How human we are.
I'm joking.
How human, yeah.
I'm playing. Let's talk about your building blocks model, because I think there's like 14 different elements, right? That within. Of course, you have a specific number in it, and jump into that and share that a little bit more with everyone.
Yeah, so the whole idea, if anybody's read any of my other books or worked with me before, you know that I do love a good model. Because, and I'm not saying it's like the perfect model in the entire world, but I just like something to sort of wrap my arms around. So as an HR person, I want something that's going to help me build my leadership, my learning and development program. So that's why we created this. And they all link directly and indirectly to the bad bosses. So some of them more than others. So for example, a hoarder, there's a building block about communications. The ignorer, there's a building block about listening. So there's 14 building blocks, which I know is a lot, but the good news is you don't need to use them all at the same time. You use them at different times. Also, there's two types of building blocks. So there's what we call the foundational ones, and these are more like the behaviors. There's 6 of them, so we call them the 6-pack. So if you think about a 6-pack, it holds things up. So things like respect and trust, authenticity, vulnerability, empathy, compassion, all the behaviors that as a boss we've learned over the years are just like so important. So again, hopefully all of you have these as part of your training programs. And then the others are more the tools, things like empowerment, that goes back to Micromanager, inspiration, excuse me, development, coaching, feedback, appreciation, listening, and communication. And they all have partners too, so that they're even stronger together. So if you just have listening without communications, you're not as strong. So yeah, so there's really 7 pairs.
Oh, I love that. So that's why you've got feedback with appreciation, and development with coaching, and empowerment with inspiration.
Because they work together. So like appreciation is a form of feedback, but it's an area that we need to focus on. You know, as I said, listening and communication, development and coaching are 2 different ways to grow your people. And then on the ones, the foundational ones, empathy opens the door to compassion. Respect leads to trust. So yeah, they work together.
Yeah. One of the things that I love that you did is you created definitions for all of these different things, because sometimes what I see in companies is one of the reasons people don't have these conversations, they don't have the right language in order to have the conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I love that you included that, by the way.
Oh, good.
So
good.
when people because you can all read that and be like, okay, that's what we're talking about. That's the definition of what that means. So the important question is, how do I find out which ones I have?
Well, starting up from Bad Bosses, the good thing is that my co-author, who is actually my husband also.
Oh, wow.
He's a senior engineering manager. So I asked him to write the book with me because we have very different perspectives on how to be a boss. I come from HR, he comes from engineering. So together we were more powerful. But speaking of powerful, since he's an engineer, he created a free test that people could take online, which tells them which of the bad boss types you need to focus on.
Oh, wow.
And then it tells you which building blocks to focus on as well. So that was his gift to me. Amazing. And everyone else.
So that's free.
Yeah, it's free. Clear. Yeah, absolutely free. We're working on something that you can send out to your employees as 360 feedback.
Oh, nice.
But for yourself right now, we're like, let's just get it out there in the world. And incredible. I think we've had about 2,000 people. I don't know the details because it's not just free, it's completely anonymous. So like, I don't even know anybody's results. I wanted to. So selfishly, I wanted to be able to see the results.
But it has to be anonymous, of course. Yeah.
But I didn't want people to think that I was being Big Brother. So all I know is how many people have taken it.
Yeah. How long does it take? Just out of curiosity.
Like less than 5 minutes. I've got no attention span, so it had to be something that I could take.
Yeah. So everyone listening right now, is it right, Deborah, if I put that in the comment section? Oh, cool. Yep. I'm excited. I'm excited to do it, but I'm also like, oh no, what's gonna come back?
Yeah. But I think the whole.
Yeah. Or you just answered my next question, which is what are the actions I need to take once I find out? But so that 3-step process.
It is, yeah. So awareness, acceptance, and action. And the great thing, one of my approaches to writing books is I'm the first to say I don't have all the answers, which is why I love writing books, because I interviewed 24 thought leaders. So like for feedback, I went to Kim Scott, who wrote Radical Candor. I mean, like the best book on feedback ever. And she was very gracious with her time. And she shared information that then I could pass on to people. So I interviewed some amazing people. And at the end of the book, actually, I should put this for free on my website, all of the books that we recommend. I think I'll put that on the website too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I think there's like 20 books I recommend, just so like if you want to learn more about feedback or you want to learn more about listening, I recommend a book on listening and all of those types of things.
Yeah. Should everyone be a manager and a boss?
No. And it's interesting because I always told my husband he would be a great boss, only because I saw how he was with our children. And I saw him as he interacted with other people, but he didn't want to be a boss. It took him a while because he really wanted to focus just on coding. He loved coding. And he said, I don't want to deal with people. People are not what I want to do. And it wasn't until he felt it was the right time for him to move on to be a boss. And he's a great boss. But I think it's a perfect example. If he had been forced to be a boss at the right time, at the wrong time, it would have been wrong for him and wrong for his people.
Yeah. And I think one good thing now is that many companies are now creating great career paths for individual contributors, whereas in the past you didn't have that. So you kind of like the only way up was to become a manager, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Right? Whereas if you could be, especially an engineer is a perfect example, right? A highly skilled specialist in that craft, you know, they don't want to be, maybe they don't want to be a manager or a boss. They want to be good at that thing and be the expert in that field. But just most companies just don't have a career path for that type of talent typically.
I'm only smiling because I can remember, I've been doing HR a long time.
Yeah.
And I can picture like it was yesterday, sitting in the boardroom trying to convince our board to create dual tracks for our engineering people. And it took a lot because nobody did it back then.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of convincing. And it was just what we talked about. There's these amazing engineers. We keep seeing everyone on their team leaving. So I had to bring data out. Like now you don't have to convince anybody to do it. It makes sense. But yeah, back then it was an uphill battle. But I'm so glad that, as you say, companies are doing that now.
Yeah. Is there anything that we've not spoken about that's important that you want to leave with our listeners?
I guess we talked about it at the beginning, just that concept of, just acceptance and just accept that we're going to get it wrong. And also accept that everybody is going to want something different for you. So you might be a great boss when it comes to one person in one moment in time, and you might be a bad boss to someone else. So the more that you can be aware of it, then you can do something about it and just accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes. But if you build that foundation, we talk about respect and trust being like the core. Because if I go back to my boss, who is a firefighter, I had such respect and trust for them. If things went wrong, that's fine. We were patient with them. So if you can start with really strong foundational building blocks, then you've got time to make mistakes.
Yeah, love it. Before I let you go, 2 questions. One, what's your question or challenge to all of our LinkedIn viewers? Because I'm going to post that on LinkedIn.
What's my question?
Or challenge. I guess you can set them a challenge, or you can ask them a question, and we're going to post that on LinkedIn, and you can get the feedback from everyone.
So since we've been talking about the whole concept of bad bosses, my challenge is, what do you think you're doing really well, and what do you think are your opportunities for improvement? That would be my challenge.
Let's see how vulnerable people are willing to be.
Yeah.
I'll go first as we're saying it. So I think, based on, just so everyone on LinkedIn doesn't feel like they're alone in being vulnerable, looking at the list, I think one of the things that I feel like I've been a bit of an avoider recently, because there's been a lot going on in the business, and I've been trying to be a firefighter, and by being a firefighter, I've become an avoider, if that makes sense. As well, and those 2 things really stood out to me, that just got brought to my front of mind now for this conversation, that I need to focus on. So I appreciate you for that.
And just so you know, when we were writing the book, I probably had examples for every single one. So that's my vulnerability. Yeah.
So listen, anyone listening right now, make sure you go grab a copy of the book. There'll be a link in the description below. Also, reach out to Debra. She speaks at a lot of events, so you could have she's an amazing speaker. Also does workshops. You designed a workshop around all this for leaders and managers. So that's also something you should definitely hit Debra up for. And also consulting, right? So you've lived and breathed this as well, right? What I love about you is you're not just coming at this with a perspective of, I've done some research, which is great, obviously, but you've lived and breathed the role of many of the HR leaders that are listening to the show right now. So I think that's an added value to what you bring to the table for everyone listening.
I've been told I have a story for everything. And I think the good thing is sometimes, this is being vulnerable. I think sometimes I've had opposition. Oh, you've been doing HR for so long, you just don't know how to do it in this new world. And I think that what I show people is that even, what's the expression? Old dogs can learn new tricks.
Yeah.
So
you've done a lot of expressions today.
I know.
You've been pretty good.
I've only had 1 cup of coffee. Just imagine if I had a glass of wine. But yeah, I think it shows that anybody can change. If you have the right mindset and you have the right goal, then anybody can go out and change and do things better. Amazing. We wrote our book and we dedicated it to our children because we want to create a world where they have great bosses and then they become great bosses themselves. That to me, that's nirvana.
You should have added a section of which of these things that you and your husband became throughout the writing of the book.
Oh, definitely. It's funny you say that because he kept going, "You're being a micromanager. You're being an ignorer."
Yeah.
We should have done that.
That'd be funny.
Next book.
Next book. Well, listen, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Super excited to get this in the hands of all of our audience and all of the managers and leaders that they serve all over the world. And keep up the amazing work. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it and share.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. See you soon. Thanks.